Russia continues to attack civilian sites, including this week alone, a hospital, 3 schools, a boarding school for visually impaired kids in the Luhansk region of Ukraine. Yesterday, Russian forces bombed a theater in Mariupol where hundreds of people had been taking shelter. The word children had been written in Russian in giant white letters on the pavement outside the building so that you could know from the air that there were children inside. Russian forces also opened fire on 10 civilians who were waiting in line for bread. These incidents join a long list of attacks on civilian, not military locations across Ukraine, including apartment buildings, public squares, and last week, a maternity hospital in Mariupol. I doubt that any of us who saw those images will ever forget them. We've seen Russia use similar tactics before, in Grozny, in Aleppo. They stepped up their bombardment with the goal of breaking the will of the people. Yesterday, President Biden said that, in his opinion, war crimes have been committed in Ukraine. Personally, I agree. Intentionally targeting civilians is a war crime. After all the destruction of the past 3 weeks, I find it difficult to conclude that the Russians are doing otherwise. The consequences of Moscow's war are being felt around the world in rising food costs, concerns about fuel supplies, more broadly in worries about how this war will affect the global economy and the fight against COVID-19. These are serious issues that the global community urgently needs to address. This war is making that much more difficult. In this way, Russia's actions are having an impact on every person on the planet, wherever they live. We also feel the impact right here in this room. There should be a seat reserved here today for Benjamin Hall from Fox News, who was injured badly when his vehicle came under attack near Kyiv. Many of us, myself included, have gotten to know Ben very well as part of the traveling press corps. He's an incredibly talented reporter, always asking tough questions. He's a lovely person as well. Our thoughts, my thoughts, are with him and his family, including his 3 little kids. 2 of Ben's Fox News colleagues, Pierre Savchevsky and Sasha Kushanova, were killed in the attack. And Brent Renaud, a reporter on assignment with Time magazine, was killed in a separate attack a day earlier. I know that everyone in this room, in particular, feels these losses deeply. Being a war correspondent is vital work. They make sure that the world knows what's really happening when armies move in and bombs start falling. It also takes incredible courage. They go into war zones when others, understandably, are heading out as fast as possible. So these are huge losses, of course, for families, for friends, but also for their colleagues, their profession, their readers and viewers who understand world events because of them. Our experts are in the process of documenting and evaluating potential war crimes being committed in Ukraine. Beth Van Schack, whom the Senate finally confirmed this week as our ambassador at large for global criminal justice, will be leading that effort within the State Department. We'll make sure that our findings help international efforts to investigate war crimes and hold those responsible accountable. I'd also mention that there are several other nominations before the Senate with a direct bearing on our ability to support Ukraine, including for Assistant Secretary of State for Population, Refugees, and Migration, Assistant Secretary of State for International Security and Nonproliferation, and our Coordinator for Sanctions Policy. So I urge the Senate to confirm these nominees quickly so that they can get to work as soon as possible. A few weeks ago, just days before Russia's invasion began, I went to the United Nations Security Council to lay out what we believed was about to happen. Again today, we have a strong sense of what Russia could do next. We believe that Moscow may be setting the stage to use a chemical weapon and then falsely blame Ukraine to justify escalating its attacks on the Ukrainian people. Manufacturing events and creating false narratives of genocide to justify greater use of military force is a tactic that Russia has used before, including in Georgia. We believe Russia will bring its mercenaries from private military groups and foreign countries to Ukraine. President Putin acknowledged as much over the weekend when he authorized the recruitment of additional forces from the Middle East and elsewhere. Another indication that his war effort is not going as he hoped it would. They're also likely to systematically kidnap local officials and replace them with puppets. Again, this has already begun. The mayor of Melitopol was grabbed off the street several days ago, released yesterday in a prisoner exchange. The mayor of another city in southern Ukraine was also kidnapped. He hasn't yet been let go. This is a terror tactic. Grab local officials, depose local governments, put proxies in their place. After devastating Ukrainian cities, Moscow may bring in officials from Russia to serve as local government officials and surge what they describe as economic support in an attempt to make the people dependent on Moscow for survival. Again, something that Russia did in Georgia. President Putin's invasion of Ukraine is not going to plan. The Ukrainian people haven't welcomed the Russian military. They haven't submitted. On the contrary, they're fighting with extraordinary courage to protect their homes, their families, their country. Russia has been hit by unprecedented sanctions and cut off from the global economy. Its own economy is in free fall. Hundreds of corporations have closed operations. In a matter of weeks, President Putin has destroyed 30 years of opening to the world and economic opportunity for the Russian people. Dozens of members of the Kremlin's corrupt power base have been sanctioned. Several have lost their mega yachts and villas. President Putin has derided those sanctions, using recent public diatribes to mock Russians living abroad as too dependent, as he said, on foie gras and oysters. Meanwhile, he sits in his mansions, having accumulated billions, taking wealth from the Russian people while they stand in long lines to access cash and watch as stores close and the ruble plummets in value. It's no wonder that brave Russians continue to protest the war and be beaten and arrested for it. And Russian journalists are resigning from their jobs at state media outlets because they can't stomach parroting the Kremlin's lies any longer. Still, President Putin is not relenting, and in fact may be growing more desperate. And so yesterday, President Biden announced, and I authorized another $800 million in military aid to Ukraine. That brings our support for Ukraine's frontline defenders to more than $2 billion during this administration, $1 billion in the last week alone. We're grateful to have a determined and generous partner in Congress, which this week provided more than $13 billion in urgent support to Ukraine. And we'll continue to work with lawmakers to support Ukraine and hold the Kremlin to account. As President Biden described, this new security assistance package includes 800 anti-aircraft systems to stop attacking planes and helicopters before they destroy more of Ukraine, 9,000 anti-armor systems to destroy tanks and armored vehicles, 7,000 small arms, including machine guns and grenade launchers, and 20 million rounds of ammunition. We're also helping Ukraine acquire longer-range anti-aircraft systems and munitions at President Zelensky's request. And I've been in almost daily contact with Foreign Minister Kuleba, coordinating to respond swiftly to Ukraine's most urgent needs. Our allies and partners continue to step up with their own significant shipments of security assistance. I've authorized more than a dozen countries to provide U.S. origin equipment, and dozens more around the world have provided security assistance of their own. I'd also note that in addition to assistance from the Department of Defense, we're sending support from other agencies, including $10 million worth of armored vehicles from our own diplomatic security service. And yesterday, I announced another $186 million in humanitarian assistance to help the more than 3 million refugees who fled Ukraine in the past 3 weeks, the fastest growing refugee crisis in Europe since World War II, as well as internally displaced people still in Ukraine. This brings our total humanitarian aid since last month to $293 million. And of the more than $13 billion for Ukraine that Congress is putting forward, more than $4 billion of that will go to humanitarian assistance. Ukraine's neighbors in Europe are generously welcoming, supporting refugees. The United States will do our part to help those governments and the humanitarian organizations on the ground meet this tremendous need. All the steps that we and our allies and partners are taking are aimed at one goal: to end the war. The support we're providing Ukraine, as well as our financial and economic measures against Moscow, will strengthen Ukraine's hand at the diplomatic table. And we commend Ukraine for staying at that table and continuing to pursue diplomacy while the Kremlin's brutal aggression continues. We'll support Ukraine's diplomatic efforts however we can. We continue to call on all nations, especially those with direct influence with Russia, to use whatever leverage they have to compel Moscow to end this war of choice. We believe China in particular has a responsibility to use its influence with President Putin and to defend the international rules and principles that it professes to support. Instead, it appears that China is moving in the opposite direction by refusing to condemn this aggression while seeking to portray itself as a neutral arbiter. And we're concerned that they're considering directly assisting Russia with military equipment to use in Ukraine. President Biden will be speaking to President Xi tomorrow and will make clear that China will bear responsibility for any actions it takes to support Russia's aggression, and we will not hesitate to impose costs. Let me close by saying that President Zelensky's message to Congress and to the American people yesterday was incredibly powerful. He's asked for more help, which we are providing and will continue to provide. And he said that the people of Ukraine want the same things for themselves that we want for ourselves: democracy, independence, freedom. No one who's watched the events of the past 3 weeks could ever doubt the depth of Ukraine's commitment to these ideals. We'll continue to stand with Ukraine as it fights for its future. We'll continue to increase the costs on Russia until it ends this war of choice. And we'll continue to provide life-saving aid to the Ukrainian people as they endure the brutal consequences of Russia's aggression. With that, happy to take some questions.
Paul. So what do you think about the talks between Ukraine and Russia? Are they making any progress? President Zelensky seems to suggest there are things they are talking about.
So we're in close contact, as I said, with Ukraine's leaders, including, in my case, Foreign Minister Kuleba. We're in close contact with other countries that have, in one way or another, been engaging on diplomacy. And to date, I have to say, on the one hand, we commend Ukraine for being at the table despite being under bombardment every minute of the day. At the same time, I have not seen any meaningful efforts by Russia to bring this war that it's perpetrating to a conclusion through diplomacy. We support Ukraine's efforts to try to de-escalate through diplomacy, to reach a ceasefire, and, of course, the withdrawal of Russian forces. We appreciate the efforts of other countries, including France, Germany, Israel, Turkey, and others. But again, from where I sit, diplomacy requires both sides engaging in good faith to de-escalate, and I don't see signs right now that Putin is prepared to stop. On the contrary, if you listen to, just for example, his most recent remarks yesterday, that suggests that he is moving in the opposite direction. But never mind the words, what we're really focused on is actions. And the actions that we're seeing Russia take every single day, virtually every minute of every day, are in total contrast to any serious diplomatic effort to end the war. So we're looking to see Russia take meaningful actions to de-escalate, to stop the violence that is perpetrating on Ukraine, and to engage in good faith talks. We will support any effort that Ukraine makes to do that. We're certainly doing everything we can to back them, but also to make sure that they have the strongest possible hand if there are any real negotiations and if diplomacy does advance. Hence the support that we're giving to Ukraine, as well as the pressure that we continue to put and even increase on Russia.